Hey, it's Jordan with TYT Politics, and I am here with Anthony Rogers Wright. He's an environmental activist. He was an environmental advisor to Senator Bernie Sanders' run for president. He has been with me at Standing Rock several times and has been on the real forefront of a lot of environmental battles. I thought of you to talk to today because obviously Trump trying to ram through Dakota Access, now Keystone he's trying to revive. It's not really a surprise, but I want to get to the actual particulars of it because a lot of people don't know what exactly that means with an executive order, what it means in terms of the environmental impact study that was recently an intent. I think what is it called? Intent of notice or something like that.
A notice of intent, yeah.
Yeah. So for the layman, what does Trump's executive orders mean today? Is it as bad as we think?
Right. So, I mean, first and foremost, in terms of what we're really most concerned about, which is KXL, DAPL, and then this other idea of fast tracking what he refers to as critical infrastructure or high priority infrastructure. There was only one executive order signed. He signed an executive order directing for basically fast tracking to the greatest extent possible the laying down of more pipe in fossil fuel infrastructure. That's essentially what he wants to do. He'll try to mask that and say that applies to all forms of infrastructure. And I hope we test him to that because, renewable energy is also forms of infrastructure. So we'll see about that. But as it pertains to DAPL and Keystone, he signed what's called a presidential memorandum, which a lot of people do, use interchangeably with an executive order. It is an executive action, but it's not an executive order. And here are the slight differences. So an executive order does have to get filed in the Federal Register. And even any executive order that gets filed in the Federal Register does not go into effect until 30 days after it's actually been submitted to the Federal Register. Presidential memorandums do not have to be given to the Federal Register. They don't basically have to be printed. And, from that context, some legal analysts do believe that it leaves themselves open to presidential memorandums to a bit more legal scrutiny. I'll say that, for scale, I think one way you could look at it is that whereas a executive order would be like an environmental impact statement for scale, right? The presidential memorandums are more like environmental assessments, which, of course, the environmental assessment for DAPL is being sued as we speak. So that's basically the quick differences.
How I looked at it, essentially the main thing that he said that is very important to DAPL and Keystone is the word expediting environmental reviews. To me, that's the whole ballgame. Trump, I think what he was trying to say is, I don't even know we're going to renegotiate the terms. I don't know who he's talking about. Is he going to renegotiate it with the oil companies? Is he going to renegotiate it with Standing Rock Sioux Tribe? I don't even think Trump really knows what he's saying. But with in terms of the expediting the environmental reviews, could that be perceived as he's talking about essentially the environmental impact study, which was just green-lighted by the Obama administration and Army Corps, that he's going to try to basically fuel that on steroids and get it done within 15 minutes?
Right. I mean, which he could try to do, but the bottom line is that there is law. There's the National Environmental Policy Act, which supersedes any of his memorandums or his executive orders. I mean, and essentially, it's actually kind of funny because what he's essentially saying, he's asking basically for what's happening to what's already happening to happen. And what I mean by that is that there has been a notice of intent that has been issued by the Army Corps of Engineers, which indicates that an EIS process has commenced, which includes a public commenting period. And the public commenting period ends, I believe, in the middle or the end of next month. It certainly ends next month, which is pretty quick. So essentially just like 1 month for a project this controversial is actually doing what Trump wants in the first place. So, this is really, I've been saying that we have to take this seriously. I do not want to diminish the importance of this. People still need to mobilize. People still need to do what they're going to do. But at the same time, this is really a propaganda temper tantrum of what he would like to happen, but there is still law that he has to follow. And these remember these executive actions, all three of them, are most certainly already in the process of being challenged in court.
So that's what I was getting at. So essentially, the environmental impact study, which for people who don't know, essentially means this is a full, comprehensive, exactly what it says, environmental study of how this pipeline or pipelines like it will affect the water, the land, the wildlife, the whole shebang. This was never done for DAPL. And as part of the Obama administration denying the final permit, it said that there needed to be an environmental impact study. So essentially what you're saying is Trump, he could put memorandum or order, whatever it is, to expedite an environmental impact study, but he cannot compel the Army Corps or whatever body does the environmental impact study essentially get this done by the end of the week.
Right. Here's the actual language. Okay. What he says is that any project that's designated, the term that he uses is high priority infrastructure projects. And by the way, he hasn't even determined how to determine a high priority infrastructure project. So that's just totally arbitrary right there. But what he says essentially is that under Section 2, which is high priority, this is the executive order for all infrastructure projects, which includes DAPL, I would imagine, in Trump's eyes. But what Section 2 of that executive order says is that essentially once we've determined that this is a high priority infrastructure project, the chairman of the department, so say it's Department of Energy, or in this case, Army Corps, will basically work in a manner consistent with the law, expedited procedures and deadlines for completion of environmental reviews and approvals for such projects. Which is basically saying that, like, he can ask them to, like, hurry up, but it still has to be within the confines of the law. And, the law pursuant to the National Environmental Policy Act, again, it doesn't have a time frame, but that includes, when you're talking about an EIS, a very rigorous public participation process. So here's one tactic that I would definitely say to everyone right now who's listening to this is you need to flood the Army Corps of Engineers with as many comments as possible during this comment period, because that's going to increase the amount of time. They have to look at all of these comments. They have to respond to these comments, and then they also have to take part in tribal consultation. And I imagine that, the tribes are not going to necessarily expedite this just because, their consultation process, because President Trump has asked them to.
So to the person watching, devil's advocate, they might say, this is Donald Trump. He doesn't care about the law. He'll find a way. Reince Priebus around him, Mike Pence, not exactly high ground moral type of people. So you're saying he could try whatever he wants, but there is, already standing law that's clear as day that he cannot work around or supersede.
Right. He's going to obviously put his own people, in certain positions, who are going to be making decisions. And sure, they can direct their agencies to, speed up the process. But there's only so much that you can do, right? Unless they are actually like planning on fudging the numbers, these documents are going to be heavily scrutinized by the public and by organizations like Earth Justice and other, legal bodies that are going to be looking at this, including the Standing Rock Sioux Tribe. So it would behoove them really to do as an in-depth of an analysis as possible that makes them as airtight as possible to the legal challenges which are inevitable. And there's really only so much you can do, right? So you can't do a biological assessment right now in North Dakota, right? We see the weather conditions there right now. Animals that are that could be deemed threatened or endangered by the Endangered Species Act are hibernating right now. You have to know what the numbers are. So there's only so much that people can do. This is basically a wish list, for Trump. It's sort of like me, really, really wanting that Nintendo 64 when I wanted it, but I had to wait until Christmas.